Why on earth do we have to repeat Surah Al-Fatiha again and again and again, every time in every prayer? Whatever you pray, it's a sunnah, it's a fard, it's a nawafil, you're saying the Surah Al-Fatiha. And why do we repeat it? And here's the secret. Human beings have two types of brains. One is known as the primitive brain. This is a brain which is common with all the animals. And this part of the brain, it runs on emotions of anger, fear, love, happiness. So basically it's an emotional brain. All the responses which come from your emotions are from the primitive brain. Animals have it too. When we are born, this part of the brain is quite developed and we continue to use it. As a child, everything is emotional. You're angry, you're fearful, you love something, you hate something, you break something, you throw something. The childish behavior is all from the primitive brain. The neocortex, or the new brain, which develops the cognitive thinking, the right and the wrong, it starts to develop later in life. And once that brain is developed, we become mature. So you'll see the difference between the attitude of a 5 years old and a 50 years old. That is the difference between the emotional brain, using the emotional brain, the primitive brain, and the neocortex. But there's a problem. The problem is that the neocortex, the higher brain center, which is very special for the human beings compared to the rest of the animals, we've got a huge proportion of it. Our ratio of neocortex to the rest of the brain is 60:1. That brain develops late and it needs to be trained. And to get it trained, we have to use it again and again. If you don't use your higher brain, the higher centers of the brain, you keep going to the primitive emotional brain. And you would have seen that there are some people who even at the age of 40, 50 or 60 are acting like children. They are angry, they swear, they abuse, they shout, they punch, they pull out a gun and shoot or pull out a knife and attack. And all of this is coming from the primitive brain. The higher brain centers, cognitive centers, which make rational, sensible decisions, they only develop if they've been used again and again. So you need neuronal facilitation. The more you use, the more connections are made in the neurons, in the nerve cells in that brain part, and the more powerful it becomes. So next time you need to make a decision, instead of using the emotional primitive brain, the higher sensible brain takes over. And what Surah Al-Fatiha does is reinforces that brain. So what looks like simple repetition, that you're saying the same things, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen, Iyaka na'budu wa Iyaka nasta'een, Ihdina as-sirata al-mustaqim, and then you're saying Allahu Akbar and Subhana Rabbiyal Azim and Allahu Akbar and Subhana Rabbiyal A'la. This is all training your higher brain center. And you are getting it trained 5 times a day. And you're doing it again and again and again. This is Allah's way of training your intellectual centers, your sensible centers, your emotional control center. This is what makes us human. And all of this repetition is facilitating pathways, is facilitating neurons in the neocortex and making them fire again and again. Every time you say Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen, the same neurons get fired. They get more connections, they get more flow of current through them. And next time, little stimulus is required to fire them again. And you'll see the difference, that people who have been praying regularly, they become much more calmer. They become more in control of their emotions. And they are not controlled by their anger. They are not controlled by their hatred. They are not controlled by their fear. They are not controlled by their lust. They are controlled by their sensible thinking. But there's one problem. If we are reading Surah Fatiha and all the other surahs without understanding what it means, without knowing the meaning of the words, or with misunderstanding them, it is not going to have the same beneficial effect, because then it just becomes a ritual. It becomes a simple worship without translating into the good deeds and without translating into the understanding of the message.